Hey everybody, this is Jamie Loves Martial Arts. I want to welcome you guys to the 17th episode of Martial Praxis podcast. I'm here with Alan Odinson, and really excited to interview him about martial archery. So maybe you could just start by telling us a little bit about your background with martial arts and with archery, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I've probably been doing martial arts about as long as I've been doing archery. I started I was probably about 15 or so, I think, when I started. First art I ever took was Aikido, actually.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
it's actually the only art that I actually have a black belt in. So, but I've done a lot of different. It's probably the one I use the least too. So, but yeah, I started with that probably for the same reason everybody started Aikido, in the 90s. But um,
Does that happen to be Steven Seagal?
I'll never admit it. I'll never say. But but yeah, I started with that. Then I got into actually got into my grappling background actually started with shoot wrestling.
Ah,
So yeah, so I was learning from a guy that was actually under Eric Paulson, and
oh,
we were
cool.
learning to shoot wrestling like the old Yori Nakamura style, like
Yeah,
so we
yeah. I
were
just actually did the last two episodes ago that I released was with Jake Shannon, who's a big catch wrestling guy. So yeah, I'm
yeah.
super
Oh yeah, I know
familiar
Jake.
with that.
Yeah, me and Jake met each other forever ago under Tony Cicchini back in the day. So
Gotcha.
yeah, I know Jake. But yeah, but yeah, I did shoot wrestling, did Muay Thai. The school I was at had everything. So you
Wow,
could do Wing Chun, you could do Kali, you could do shoot wrestling, you could do Muay Thai. So you really literally do everything, which was awesome.
that's
Um,
cool.
so I
I
did that.
imagine that eventually when I open up a place, hopefully it'll be like that. We have like all different martial arts. I mean, sometimes I think it's too much for people to do all at once. So I was hoping to have some kind of like rotating curriculum, but I haven't exactly figured that all out yet.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. It was kind of cool because like literally you had all your ranges. You had your strike. Actually you had your weapons range because we had Kali there, and then you moved closer with the striking range with Muay Thai. Then that moment in time gap of Wing Chun, and then to the grappling. So it was literally
Yeah,
like
yeah, that
stages of
is
getting
cool.
closer. So and I did a little bit of I don't want to call it MMA because it wasn't like technically sanctioned at the time, so it was technically still under the rule of the umbrella of Vale Tudo.
Ah,
So like it was like old school, like no gloves and everything. I did like
yeah.
a couple of fights when I was like 17.
Oh, that's cool.
Crazy. Yeah, we was literally just in a gym, dude. Like we were in a gymnasium with mats on the floor.
I mean, that
Um,
kind of stuff is really good experience, though, right? I feel like it colors your development in the long term. Like you learn, what you get a sense of what that level of pressure is like and the level of violence, and it kind of inoculates you a little bit.
yeah, for sure, because back then there was no rounds, so it was just like 20-minute time limit. And I remember my very first fight. I was 17. My very first fight, the guy I went up against was much bigger, much more experienced than me, and he pretty much beat on me for 20 minutes. So it was
It's so
like,
interesting with like the difference between dueling and like an attack, right? Like when someone just attacks someone else on the street, it's often very quick, right? Like they usually it's like an ambush of some sort, right? But then
mhm.
once two people, even with very minimal rules, like once two people agree to fight and you're gonna have a fight with the other person, though this it can get so prolonged.
Yeah, and honestly, what's crazy is he ended up in mount for a large majority of the match and was just pretty much hitting from mount. And I was holding and trying to work loose and everything. And like it literally, I joke about it that I basically did like the Homer Simpson defense of he got so tired from hitting me in the head. Like, because it was a tournament, he couldn't continue. He was so tired from the tournament. So I was like, but but yeah, no, but yeah, I've done a lot of different martial arts. I still train now. Me and you, we met initially
Yeah.
with Lavelle with the Mongolian wrestling with the bulk seminar and Shuaijiao. And I still train. I try to get most weekends and train with the MMA guys and the guys who train for kickboxing fights at Carolina Kickboxing in Florence. So I usually show up there on the weekends and fight with guys half my age. So, you know, it's pretty cool. I enjoy it. But yeah, I
Very
mean,
cool.
I've always been a massive martial arts, and pretty much everything that I do is based around those concepts, including the archery.
So then how did you, what was your journey with the archery stuff like? How'd you get started, and I mean, now you're like, it seems like you're pretty knowledgeable about many different styles and types of archery. You know, you seem to be kind of like have a wide range of knowledge when it comes to this, whereas I feel like a lot of other people tend to like kind of go like, you know, they're doing archery for hunting, or you know, they know about kyoto, you know, like they tend to kind of narrow in. I know there's a girl out in Mongolia that Lavelle has worked with who does Mongolian horse archery. You know, they tend to be like kind of very specific, but you seem to have a more broad knowledge and approach.
Yeah, for me, I started again very young age. And I started like most people do here in the US. I started with just using the traditional three finger, you know, the old Mediterranean like longbow style shooting, just like everybody else started. And I did that for years, for a very long time. And I started learning about some of the different styles, mainly in the East, because really here in the US, or just in the West in general, the style of archery I do it's still very foreign to a lot of people, because it's
Yeah.
mainly centered around an Asiatic concepts. And when I say Asiatic concepts, I mean, you know, obviously parts of Asia, but also in the Middle Eastern culture as well. I would say a lot of my style probably leans more towards that Middle Eastern style of archery now, which is the thumb draw style. That uses, it's completely opposite of what you see a lot of times with the three finger style archery. Even as long as I've been doing it, I still get comments and messages all the time of, hey, you know, you claim to know things, but your arrow's on the wrong side. And it's like, okay, other half of the world shoots this way. All right. So
Fascinating. Maybe you could like show us the
yeah,
difference between the
absolutely.
two. I,
I've got a lot of stuff here I can show and tell you. So,
Very cool.
so yeah, I've got a lot of different style bows and stuff here. So this is actually one somebody brought from Istanbul for me. I had them kind of deliver it to me, but I can actually show you both styles with the same bow, so it doesn't really necessarily matter. So like your typical like three finger style is for a right-handed shooter, meaning you're holding the bow in the left hand, you're drawing with your right hand. You're going to do like the three fingers on here. Arrow goes on the left side of the bow, and you essentially are drawing the bow like straight back, and then you're releasing off of this. So the style I do is more of an Asiatic style, which is like a thumb draw style. So with the thumb draw style, as a right-handed shooter, arrow goes on the opposite side of the bow, and I'll show you why that's a thing. And it's actually good that I grabbed this bow, this particular one. I got a bunch of them here that I'll show you some different style bows, but because the serving's very loose on this, so this doesn't really lock in and it'll fall off very easily. So I can actually show you this. So the reason you see this a lot in Asiatic styles, as well as with horse archers also, is with the thumb draw. The thumb actually locks under here, underneath it, and then this will go. There's a couple different ways people hold.
Oh, wow.
I tend to just hold here and here. Okay. Now, the part that makes this so unique, especially for horse archery, is there's an inward tension towards the riser of the bow here. So what that means is, if I had, let's say I had like this three finger method and I'm on the horse and the horse is moving, my
Yes.
arrow's bouncing everywhere.
It locks
right?
it into place for when there's movement.
Exactly. So when I hold it here, I mean, I can move it all over the place. It's not going to move.
Wow.
And that's even if it's drawn back, I can
That's
still
fascinating.
move it here. So it makes for a very, very controlled shot. And a lot of the guys use, when they're shooting, they'll use different style like thumb rings. So these are
Yeah.
basically like, instead of the gloves, they have different ones that offer like protection in here for the thumb. I've been
Ah,
shooting a while, so I will actually shoot like bare thumb a lot of times.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
just me. But essentially it locks into place here, and the release. So when you're shooting three finger, whenever you let go, you don't want to move anything, right? You want to keep everything here. The
yeah.
difference with the thumb draw, when we release, we actually want to move the bow over this opening motion. So
And
it's
that
kind of like,
counters for the inward pressure.
yes,
That
it doesn't count for that, but it also allows for a cleaner release. And also, when you have this initially came through, you really see it a lot from. They really kind of got it to a science with like the Middle Eastern styles. So a lot of times, say for like war archers, when you're using wooden arrows, you never quite know whether or not it's the exact right arrow for that particular bow. So they can
yes.
fly kind of weird. Now, when you do this opening, rather than the bow, they have a thing called archer's paradox. So when the arrow shoots, it's essentially flexing like this around this riser. However, if it's too stiff, it's not going to flex. It'll go around, it'll fly like crazy. If I do this opening motion here, I'm essentially moving it out of the way. So even if the arrow's not perfectly correct,
Perfect.
I'm still going to get a straight flight.
Uh,
Yeah,
so
it's pretty fascinating.
would you say that the style, the thumb draw style, maybe developed based off a need of archers to move around versus a stationary archer?
100%. Yeah, because its strength is really in motion. You
Yeah.
have a lot of control over your arrow, which is absolutely important when you're having to move.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of different options in there that you can have where even with like your stances and stuff, with large bows like your war bows and everything, you think about it, I mean, you're pretty much confined to a certain style of shooting. You got to get,
Yeah.
if you ever see like a warbow archer, they get in and like, I mean, they have to put like their whole body into it. Whereas an archer in motion, archer on horseback, with a shorter bow that's still plenty powerful enough. I mean, some of the old warbows were 160 plus pound draw weight
Whoa.
that
Oh
were
my
this
God.
big. Yeah.
I've been playing around with that trainer that you sent me. I meant to bring it, but I actually left it at home. Like, and that thing, the maximum draw is like 100 pounds, and I'm like a pretty strong guy, and I have a hard time pulling 100 pounds.
It's very tough.
I
I
can't
can
imagine pulling 160. Like,
Yeah, it's insane. There's a whole technique to it. Really, I have trouble pulling heavier bows. My both of my shoulders are like wrecked.
yeah,
I can pull 100, but like it's very difficult. And it's not so much my drawing shoulder. My
the
left arm
stabilizer.
yeah, it's got this arm actually has a slap tear in it from like forever. So it's still like messed up. But like, I can still draw up to, 60, 70 pounds and hold. And that's the other thing with like
Comfortably.
the hold. I was telling you, we were talking about like the engagement of the back.
Yeah,
And
I'm curious about the difference in the technique from different styles.
yeah, so I can show you that here real quick too. So like, let's say like with like a Mediterranean, you watch like a lot of guys when they're shooting here, they'll draw about right here, and you can see I have decent alignment here. You notice like from my elbow to my hand, you've got a fairly straight line
Yep.
here for the most part. However, there's also a lot of tension. I can feel it, even though I'm feeling it in my back here. There's also a lot of tension in my shoulders. Like I can feel that a lot in my shoulders.
Yeah, it's
Whereas,
like compressive.
right. Whereas with like, say, like the thumb draw style, when I talked about squeezing those shoulder blades together. So when I'm in here, you'll see a little bit of a difference. You'll see when my back gets set, you can almost see like a set in there. So when I come back to here, rather than stopping here, I'll lower everything and set my back. And
Ah,
I'm locked in here. Like this is like I can hang here for quite a while and hold this position and just chill
yeah.
here and stay fairly locked in. And when I'm ready to go, I can open up and release.
Huh.
So, and that's the other thing too. You notice when I was here, when that release, like I literally just let that tension off my
Yep.
body.
Yeah,
And
you don't have to hold it still like you do with that three finger Mediterranean style.
it can be difficult. It's stressful in the shoulder. A lot of guys think they get back into their shot, but they really don't. Like it's just not quite as much back. And I'll show them. I'm like, look, you should be like here. And usually the easiest way to tell that is I'm gonna grab another. I'm gonna grab a different bow. This one's a little heavier. It's also a little prettier too. But
Oh wow.
yeah, it's this is a Mamluk style bow here. So like with that set, when you get in there, you can tell if they've got a lot of back into it, because if they release and I see this move a lot, you don't have as much back in there because you see all this motion here. But if you watch when I release, you're going to see minimal movement in this rear arm here. It's just that's because I physically can't move any further.
The
My
back is
scapula
already completely engaged, so there's nowhere for it to go. Yeah.
So when you lock in, like you're like there, like it's like boom, I am set, like I am trying to touch those shoulders together.
That's fascinating. That's super interesting. So when since you've kind of, it seems like you've studied both archery and other martial arts kind of together. I'm curious about like the the interplay between that stuff. Like, do you like how has the archery impacted your practice of other martial arts, and how did the practice of other martial arts impact your archery? Like, what do you feel like the relationship is there?
Yeah, well, that typically what I find, like for me, like with the archery, man, is like there's a certain sense of calmness that you get because of the focus that you have to have when you're
Yeah.
shooting. Uh, but also from a general strength and what's the word I'm looking for? Like a stability standpoint, like the stabilizers in your body, just from the power of getting that motion and getting things locked into place and learning how to get proper alignment in your body to get set, because you can't sit here and do this over and over and over and over and over and over with just using muscles. So
Yeah.
especially like with me having a pretty bad shoulder injury, and my other shoulder's not that great. So I essentially have to make sure that technique is like perfect. And we know from martial arts standpoint that that's always gonna trump everything else. Strength adds to it. Like you can
Yes.
be strong, and strength is gonna make it better. But if
Yes.
your technique is garbage, you're only gonna go so far.
No, yeah, it reminds me of almost like, like framing in jujitsu, or like jin in Chinese martial arts, or even like what they talk about in Aikido, that like you have to have this structure through the body that's transmitting the force. It's not that it's non-muscular, but that you're
Mm-hmm.
stacking the joints and the bones and finding an alignment where you can bear these forces in a more efficient way. It's interesting
Exactly.
that the first thing though that popped into your head was like the mental development, because that's something that I actually had written down as a specific question for you, because it seems like it would do that for a person. I never had the opportunity to do a lot of like shooting of like guns or bows, but they're both things I've always wanted to study Kyudo, because of the I'm very interested in the integration of like the Zen uh philosophy
Mm-hmm.
with the physical practice. So kind of like taking this like Zen and Buddhist approach to meditation and taking it off the cushion and doing something with it. Like that whole process is really interesting to me. And also, one of my favorite books on mindset is With Winning in Mind, and that comes from Lanny Basham, who's he was an Olympic target shooter, and he has just such a wealth of knowledge of the mental aspect of performance. And I feel like for some reason these target sports, where you're trying to aim at a target, really enhance your mental development. So that was specifically something I was wondering about, like if you feel like the archery develops certain mental qualities that you think have transferred into your martial arts practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Not just from a relaxation standpoint, but it's also a being in the moment standpoint also, because that's very important. A lot of people talk about with the archery, like people use the term like instinctive shooting. We hear that. I hear that a lot. I'm instinctive shooting, and my argument is always that you're not instinctive shooting. Like my dog instinctively knows certain things, because like without having to be taught. People, you don't hand people a bow and they just, wow, I hit the middle. Like it's not something that's instinctive. But what I tell people is, you actually, by calling it instinctive, you're actually kind of downgrading something that you're doing,
Yeah.
because what we call instinctive shooting is essentially you're drawing up and you're like, I'm just looking at the target. And I'm like, yes, but you have secondary and primary focuses. And your primary focus is the target, but your secondary is on whatever point of aim that you've worked out in your head. What you're
Yeah.
actually doing is you have the ability to go up and go bam and make your shot instantaneously. So you hit all of those calculations in your head that fast. You judge range, you judge your hold, you judge everything that quick. And I think that accounts for a lot of the mental acuity that goes into our martial arts training too, because we're literally learning to do a lot of things at a very fast pace, but we see it like, it's like, you teach jujitsu and everything. Yeah, I tell people all the time, like when you're training, they're like, man, I couldn't get anything today. They're like, I tried to get that Kimura and I just couldn't hit it. I said, but you saw it. I was like, if you never saw it, that would be a problem, but you knew it was
Yes.
there,
Yes.
right? So next time you may be on time for it. Like
Well, I think
that's
it's there's so much debate right now in the public forum, and I've sort of started to fall heavier on the ecological dynamic side of things recently. And it's interesting that you bring up the idea of like instinctive shooting, just because like so there's this notion in ecological dynamics versus information processing theory, where in information processing there's this idea that like, okay, we have like a central governor in our head, and that central governor is basically like doing calculus all the time, so like it makes these instantaneous calculations. Versus in ecological dynamics, it's this notion that we could just kind of like understand the capacity in this example of like the bow, and understand the distance of the target, and just sort of like do it based off what we're experiencing without necessarily precisely calculating the distance or precisely calculating the angle that we need to raise the bow to. So I think instinctive shooting, like the idea is probably decent, but I think maybe the name is kind of off, you know? And
exactly.
it's interesting too, because in my Chinese martial arts training, it's known there's this notion of the, like they call like the endowment, or like the what is it called, like natural boxing, right? So that the idea that we already have these capabilities within us, but actually what we need to do is get out of the way. And that, there's some aspect of our mind that's like really in the way of this. And I don't know, like I think that in some ways people think that that negates the existence of skill, but to me it's really like just changing our idea of what skill is, which is kind of like what you were saying with the kimura. Is like, if you saw the opportunity for the kimura but you missed capitalizing on it, right? That's, you're developing skill. Because to me, what the skill, what a higher level of skill really is the ability to perceive the opportunity and capitalize on it. And to me, that doesn't so much come down to movement patterns, but much more to perception. That the skill, most of these skills are perceptual. That like what makes a really good maybe archer better than somebody who's mediocre at archery is not necessarily their ability to draw the bow or physically where they aim the bow. It's their ability to perceive how to draw the bow and how to aim the bow. It's their ability to capture it in the mind. That's actually what enables them to have a great performance. So yeah, I think that maybe that's a bad name, because it does definitely sounds like it belittles what somebody does. Whereas like, somebody couldn't, you, like you said, you can't just pick up a bow or hop on the jujitsu mats and beat a black belt. It's not instinctive, in that way. But maybe what really good people do has become somewhat like, I don't even want to call it instinctive, but it becomes natural to them, and there's not a
Mhm.
lot of cogitation around it.
Well, when you look at people say in the archery community, in the archery world, who like one of the greatest sharpshooters that there is a guy named Byron Ferguson. And Byron Ferguson would go all around and do demonstrations, and he would have his wife hold an aspirin, and she would stand out, and she would throw it, and he could shoot the aspirin, like
Wow.
boom, just shoot it. And I mean, he traveled all over the place and did this. This was like one of his big things that he did. And we you think about that, and it's like, well, he's not really aiming, I mean, he doesn't have the time really to go, but the perception of him being able to target focus on that and follow it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the old adage of the car accident where time slows down, right? He's got such like hyper focus on that he's able to track it, and his mind is literally
Yes.
following that, and he's adjusting as he's going. He knows where it's going to be, how it's going to fall, and he is waiting on that moment to hit it.
I
It's
think
the
that's
same
also.
like shooting
No, go
like
ahead.
moving targets, the same thing, like
Yes.
moving targets. When people are shooting moving targets, and that's something that I practice. Have somebody throwing a disc and you're trying to shoot it. I mean, a lot of times if you're trying to actually hit where the target's at or wait for it to get there, it's hard to hit it. You've got to kind of track it, kind of similar
Yes.
to like skeet shooting.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. Like some of the perceptual skill involved is in predicting the movement of the target, right? Like you have to understand based off how fast it's moving and how your experience, like where it's going to fall, right? And then you're seeing the speed at which it's falling and predicting, okay, it's going to be here at this point in time. And based off knowledge of how the arrow travels, you're kind of making this adjustment on the fly. But one thing that I think is interesting here is like if you were to take the best, like maybe even like a savant, right? Like mathematician, and have them do calculus around these things and actually calculate this, they wouldn't be able to do it fast enough to shoot the arrow in time, which makes me think that there's no way that we have a central governor inside of us that's doing calculus. Like it has to be that we're directly perceiving the movement of the object and directly perceiving our own, like they call like action capacity or ability to do something, right? Like you can draw the bow at a certain speed, you can aim the bow at a certain angle, right? So you understand your own capacity. And this is also very interesting from a martial arts standpoint, is that in this case the tool becomes an extension of the martial artist, right? So like when you're holding the bow, your own capacities are enhanced by that tool, and with experience using the tool, you understand the capacity of the tool as well as yourself. So then you're kind of directly perceiving this movement of the target and acting on it in real time rather than having to do any kind of calculation, like because I just don't think anyone could do that. I don't even think there's like a supercomputer could do that, because the amount of time it would take to input the data would exceed the amount of time that the opportunity of that falling aspirin lasts.
Yeah, it's literally a moment in time, and your eyes have to pick it up. You've got to be able to track it. You've got to be able to get your shots in, and essentially too, you add the stress factor because he would do all these things in public.
And
So
yeah,
now
it's a
you've got a bunch of
performance.
people
Like you
watching
have
you
to do
going,
it.
he's gonna miss, he's gonna miss. So you're like, okay, and he would just be up there doing his little stick, and he's like, okay, and she thought he's pow, and he would just shoot it. It's like, wow. I mean, it's unreal. We used to have a guy here. I saw him on a video thing years ago was similar, something similar with like a slingshot. It was a old,
Wow.
looks like somebody's old pawpaw, and he'd had like just a regular little slingshot, and he could shoot like the stems off of plants and stuff. I mean, just poof, and just shoot it, and it's crazy.
Wild.
But yeah, with like the martial archery concept too, if you think about it, if we're thinking about it, even from if we look at the two sides, if we look at the one side that is the mental spiritual, the understanding the mental capacity aspect, and then if you look forward to the war side, the actual fighting style that was used, and a lot of people don't really talk about when I try to talk about people, they're like, oh, we got guns, right? And it's like, yeah, but when we're looking at like the historical aspects of it, you can start to understand some of the concepts of like the why they did certain things, the how certain things were done, different tricks and trickery that was used even in the archery world, in the Mamluks, the that whole area in the Middle East, the Turkish archers and everything. They had an entire literal system of archery training, like literal guilds where they
Wow.
learned all these different things. And they had tools, different attachments and tools and all these things. And when you look at like the martial aspect of it, like how are we going to use this tool to stop that particular person, place, thing, whatever it is, whether it's hunting or whatnot. They had an entire system built around it with special arrows and I mean, just it's crazy. Like they had this whole thing.
No,
And
it's
that's
really
one of the things that's
impressive.
always fascinated me. Even the transitioning of weapons, like the ability to move between, okay, I'm on horseback and I got a sword, but I need to shoot an arrow. Keeping the sword in your hand and being able to shoot an arrow also. You know, I
No,
mean,
that's
stuff
super
like that.
interesting. Like just having that methodology. I mean, there's two things that kind of pique my interest there. Like one is obviously like the specific tactics and training methods that they would use. I think the people could say, "Oh, we have guns now," but the reality is that people who go to officer training in the military are still reading the art of war. You know what I mean? Like sure, like tools change, things change, but war is always going to be war. Battle is battle, fighting is fighting, dueling is dueling. It doesn't matter what you have in your hand or what martial art you do or what kind of gun you have. That stuff is always going to have certain elements that come down to, human nature and understanding human nature and exploiting
Right.
it, right? So like that kind of stuff, I think. I mean, I recently was studying some like fencing stuff, and I was like, wow, this is actually really relevant to my grappling because when people are being defensive, they put their hands out and it functions just like a spear or a sword in that you can't move into the tip of the spear or the sword, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at the angles and trying to understand how I can take advantage of people's frames and sort of almost like cut their frame away from me
Mm-hmm.
just the way that you would do in like in a fencing context. So
Yeah.
a lot of this stuff, if you have a creative mind and you try to understand it, I think the applications are often really good, and you might be able to find a permutation of something that isn't popular right now. Like, like the whole thing with the phalanx, right? Like if phalanx was really popular during Greek times and, Spartans were using it, it was really effective, really effective. Then at some point it like weirdly falls out of favor. And then many, like almost like I don't even know how long, but centuries later, right? Romans start doing the turtle. It's like, what's the turtle? The turtle is a phalanx with a top. Like, so it's like, these things like these ideas and habits in warfare, or even in like, something like Brazilian jiu-jitsu, these things, they just cycle around. Like, like leg locks were not a thing. Then they got really popular. Then people figured out how to defend heel hooks and they stopped doing leg locks. Now they're doing straight ankle locks. That'll probably fall out of favor. People start passing guard again. These things, they
Yeah.
just cycle through. So like from a tactics standpoint, I think there's probably a lot of value in studying that stuff. I'd love some references on some of that. And then the other thing that gets me interested too, which is kind of a funny thing, is like, the guild structure is really cool. I feel like if martial arts went back to that, like it's kind of like the belt system, but much cooler and actually much more egalitarian. Like it's like there's levels, but they're strictly delineated. I mean, like I think that would actually be really interesting if we went back to like a guild like brotherhood model of training
Right.
martial arts rather than this like kind of weird like pseudo business thing.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I'm actually working on some stuff to start kind of resurrecting some of that archery guild sort of things and just kind of going back to some of the same methodologies that they use there. It's funny you were talking about like the martial arts, how things like cycle around and everything. I was thinking when you're talking about the leg locks, I was thinking with Mikey Musumeci, when he was like, oh, it's doing the Mikey lock, and I'm like, Eric Postle was teaching that in like
Yes,
'91, like
dude. It's so funny because Vlad. I don't know if you know Vlad Kulikov, but he's a
yeah, oh yeah,
sambo guy, and Vlad taught me that like forever ago. And
yeah,
Mikey's like, "Oh, this is the Mikey Glock," and I'm like, "Okay, like you whatever you could call." Like I don't really mind when people call stuff
yeah,
things. Like I think it's a little weird to name something after yourself, but like I don't have any problem with somebody doing a move and feeling like they came up with it and naming it something. That's
I,
it doesn't bother me. But it was just funny to me because I was like, I've done this before. I'm like,
yeah.
Vlad told me
That's
this forever ago. Like,
that's what I always find. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, oh, it's but
another funny
talk
one with that was so there's this funny variation of a heel hook that I do when somebody has either like saddle or if they have single leg X. So I'll grab their heel and I'll use like my perineum, like my taint, to pin their toes, and I'll pull up on the heel and I'll heel hook them with my taint. So I was calling it the gooch lock, and I taught it to one of my friends, and he went and he won this tournament with it, and everybody's calling it the Arnell lock. And I'm like, this is so funny. I'm like, I show you a move and you go do something with it. Everybody names it after you. I'm like, I showed this to you. If anything, it should be named after me.
I know, right?
Yeah, I'm like, you should have told them right then and there.
Yeah, it's funny, man. Because I will say that you see that. I think it kind of comes back to like a fundamental aspect. In the like jiu-jitsu world, there's always like a move that becomes like the flavor of the year sometimes. Like
it's like a martial zeitgeist. Like there's like a spirit of the times, right? And that that it'll either capture society as a whole, but like martial arts is like its own little sub society, and we get captured by these things.
Mm-hmm. And then once people catch on to it, it kind of starts going like honestly, I remember like when rubber guard and everything first started coming out, everyone was rubber guard. Now it's just everybody's learned to counter, and it's like you see people throw their leg up, and it's like, yeah, you're not.
This is also something that interests me about like skill development is like, so it's always cool to catch somebody with something they're not expecting, but where the real mastery is at for me is to be able to do something that people are expecting and have it still work, and also to yourself be something that Greg Souders talks about is like being immune to novelty. Is that like I understand the invariant principles of this particular thing so well that I can be immune to novelty in any situation. It doesn't matter what you do. You can come up with a new move on the spot, and I'm going to be able to understand how to deal with it based off my knowledge of the principles of this particular, space that we're working in. I think that's really important for skill, is to shoot for that, to aim for that, rather than to just be like trying to catch people with something they're not expecting.
Right. And you see that, I see it the same way in like the archery community. There's, this is definitely not talking positive or negative about the individual, but because we've talked, me and him know each other. Like Lars Anderson, when he come out and he did the fastest archery ever, and he was shooting like 10 arrows in like 2 seconds, and things like that. And when that came out, people were like, well, that's actually how it was done, because that's how he said it in the video. And most people that have been doing it a while were like, I don't think that's quite it, and he later had to kind of like recant and go, listen, this is kind of, I took a few creative liberties with the history behind it. The technique itself, great, like it's awesome. It's super fast, but it's, kind of like with some martial arts techniques, there's limitations to it. Like you're not going to grab a substantially heavier bow, even I'm talking 50 pounds and up, and you're not going to be able to shoot that quickly.
The range isn't the same.
Yeah, and also, your penetration's not going to be the same. I mean, a lot of things are going to fall apart in that, So I always like to, I want to be able to, when I teach people archery, I'm trying to show them basically like, listen, if this is a 20-pound bow, I do it this way. If it's an 80-pound bow, I do it the same way. I don't like a lot of
variation
ways of doing things. It's the same as like with the grab a handful of arrows real quick here. So like it's the same as like even with like the Lars Anderson method. I was telling people, I said, if you look like historically, this is how he was holding here. And they're like, oh, it's so much faster load. And I'm like, this is true. But problems that you run into, and we're talking just from like a reality standpoint. If I'm having to move, like what is happening here? Like these are everywhere for one. And for two, if we're thinking like warfare standpoint, a lot of people see me holding the arrows in my hand, and they'll see me either hold them like this, or they'll see me either holding them like this. And this is a traditional method that was used for like Turkish archery. You see it in a lot of different styles. And when they feed the arrow, grab a bow here real quick. When they feed the arrow in, they feed it this way, and the hand traces down it to load it up. Now, people see that and they're like, well, it's not as fast. But you also have to think about the time frame and like the concept as to why they did it. And a lot of that, I'm gonna grab a real mean, nasty looking arrow here. Look at this guy here.
Oof.
Yeah, that's a needlepoint bodkin. So the idea in this is, let's say, you think about from a quiver standpoint, your arrow holds, I'm sorry, from an arrow standpoint, your quiver holds like around 24, 25 arrows. That's going to go pretty fast.
Yeah,
So
it's more like you want to make those each arrow count rather than fire them off as fast as humanly possible, right?
exactly. Plus, if let's say my quiver's empty, and I'm like, well, your archer's not gonna be like, well, I'm out of arrows. If there's arrows laying on the ground that say the enemy shot or whatever, and I pick them up, if I just pick it up and I go, wow, and load it, what if this arrow's got a crack in it? What if it's started to break? And then I go to shoot and this arrow breaks and goes through my hand here. Now I've decommissioned myself. But
Yep.
if I get in the habit of picking the arrow up, feeding it here, this motion is checking as I'm feeding back for any inconsistencies. And I've actually had that save me a few times with wood arrows and with carbon arrows. Is I'm loading up and I go here and I go,
oh,
and
wait a
look,
second.
I can see a crack
Toss
in it.
that one.
Yeah, so it's little things like that people just see. They're like, well, it's a little bit slower, and it's like, well, it's for a reason. There's a reason that we're doing these things.
For some reason, this kind of reminds me. It's gonna sound a little out there, but it makes me think of like the Death Star, right? Like that method of like firing off all the arrows, or like there was a guy on History Channel who was doing something similar with a gun. Like he had like a little revolver and he was fanning the hammer and he could shoot at saloon distance. He would shoot like 6 people in like a fraction of a second, right?
Yeah,
So yeah,
I remember his name. I know who that guy is.
dude, that guy's so impressive, right? And like to me, those people, like, it's a weird comparison, but they're kind of like the Death Star, right? Like they're okay. You're super powerful, right? You're this super weapon, but everything, no matter how you engineer a weapon, there's always a weakness, right? So, you could have that guy in a room and he could shoot all the 6 people, but if there's somebody outside with a rifle that he doesn't see, that rifle has a longer range and they're going to clip him, right? So you could be the best, at shooting the bow off really fast, but now you got a guy on horseback that's riding around you. You got a whole bunch of people riding in a circle. They're gonna take you out. So it's interesting because to me, like, battle and combat is more a game of like rock paper scissors than building a Death Star. Like sometimes you gotta be the rock, sometimes you gotta be the paper, sometimes you gotta be the scissors. If you deploy the right element at the right time, you can beat even somebody who has superior means or a superior weapon. So I think this is a mistake in the. I think it actually comes down to like a little bit of like a flaw in human nature, that we often do things from a compensatory place. Like we feel, like this is kind of like getting into Adler's ideas, but it's like, you think about man alone in the jungle with nothing, and then you think about, okay, well, I can fire off 100 arrows in 20 seconds. It's like something a little bit compensatory about that. Like, it's like you're kind of like compensating for an inherent weakness rather than like really appraising the situation. More is not always better, and this is something that it takes a long time in any of these arts to learn. In jiu-jitsu, it comes down to like techniques. Like, people often think knowing more techniques is better. It's like the classic Bruce Lee quote. You fear the man who's practiced 1,000 things once, or the guy who's practiced one thing 1,000 times. So it's kind of interesting from that standpoint.
And that's actually something that I think is important. You're talking about like the battle with the rock paper scissors concept. One of the things that made the Mongols, and I won't even just say the Mongols. I mean, even just the horse archers, the step style archers, that made them so dangerous was their tactics. They didn't have an overwhelming force. They would use, like you were talking about the phalanx earlier. One of the reasons things like that started failing was because of the horse archers, because they realized, they're like, we will charge them and they're going to shell up, and then we're going to just open up and go around them now and shoot them as we're passing by, and we'll just keep circling them. And they realized also, with horses, we keep doing this, guess what? Now there's going to be a big dust cloud that's going to be starting to get around them, and they would just make this a circle of death. That combined with like the feigned retreat. The feint retreat was used by the Mongols. I mean, you saw it with the Turkic archers. The Mughal archers used it too. I mean, they were everybody used that, and they started learning. No matter how many times, it's like there's just something about that feint retreat. They're like, we got them, and they start chasing them, and they're like, oh, they're definitely going to chase us this time. And I just feel like there was always just this one guy that was in the background going, let them go, don't. And they're like, no, we're going to get their treasure that they're leaving. Let's go. We got them. And they would always just catch them with this every time. And you saw this a lot with these and even if we bring it to the West, the Comanche, the same thing you would see from them, the hit and run tactics, because they realize like we're not going to be able to go like head on against these people, and that's one of the things, like, I mean, like that's a martial archery standpoint that a lot of people don't get. They don't understand like the psychological aspect that comes from warfare with a bow too, because you think about it, like you're walking with your boys, formation, all of a sudden it's just like, and this guy gets hit, and it's like, it's not, you don't hear a crack, you don't hear anything. It's just all of a sudden an arrow just hit this guy, and it's like, oh my God, where'd that come from?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And that's winning a big part of the battle too. You've got all of these things happening at once, and then when it starts raining arrows, and you were talking about we're talking about like with the fast shooting. I've always been a big advocate of, I don't like speed shooting. I like speed reloading, meaning it's a single shot weapon for the most part. So I need to be able to get arrow to string quick. I don't necessarily need to make a fast shot, but I need to be ready to make a fast shot. To me, that's more important. And a lot of times that's why I stress so much when people focus on accuracy, because that's just one of the things, just quite frankly, mainly in like the thumb draw archery community, a lot of people don't really focus on the accuracy aspect of it. And that's one of the reasons I make a big deal about that. Like, I don't care how fast you can shoot them if you're not hitting. And, hitting like a bunch of shots like this is like, I need to see you doing something that is going to be, if we're looking at it from a martial standpoint, we're thinking martial archery, we need to think about where our arrows are hitting. Like that's important. You can't just, it's not like in the movies where you get hit and you're just like, oh, I'm done for. It's the same. Essentially, an arrow is a bladed weapon. So it's not a gun. That's the thing. You're not having the hydrostatic shock and all these different things. So the arrow needs to be put where you want it to go. And you found this even in some of the older like archery manuals and stuff. You have the Arab archery manual, the Saracen archery manual. There's a lot of different ones that talk about this, like, where are we going to put our shots? We've got to put them here, because this is going to disable the individual. That's why even when archers when they were fighting, that's why this the same as now. That's why this is like the center mass is what you want to hit, because essentially you're talking about an arrow. It's not like the movies where they're like, oh, I have been shot, ow, and they break it off or pull it out or whatever. You're looking at a lot of times through and through. Like it's just going to be a big hole, and it's going to go out the back, or it's going to lodge in the spine. Either way, that's like a literal instantaneous stop. So like a lot of people don't think about that. That's one of the things, just like just like from a demo thing here, we'll grab a nice little, another nasty arrow. This is a swallow's tail.
Oh, wow.
So, a lot of people would say, they're like, well, okay, that's going to be bad. But it's kind of like, so if we compare this to like the hand and half sword, I mean, you're literally talking about a through and through with this. And it's like, that is going to be a very effective thing that you can do from far off. The old meme of stabbing somebody way over there. That's literally what
an arrow is.
Yeah, it's literally what it was designed for, was to be able to go distances like that, and be able to cause that kind of damage. And you're not pulling that out. Well, you may, but there's a lot coming with it. I mean, that's
funny. I've read some descriptions about like acupoint like strikes, like the dim mock and like Marma striking, and they're like, these are the points that if you stab someone with a spear, they will die. Like, like that's the real death touch for you, is that if you run them through here, that they won't live. It's interesting too when you
Yeah,
were talking about the false retreat. Like I had a match recently, and there's this very particular position called mutual ashi. It's kind of like 50-50, but it's for outside heel hooks, and it has this unique quality that the
okay.
person who moves first loses, because as you sit up to attack the opponent, it exposes your own heel. And
Okay.
I actually lost a match quite a while ago from mutual ashi because of this. So in this match recently, we ended up in this position, and the guy goes to attack me right away, and I'm like, yes, this is that thing. I'm like, he's sitting up, and here's his heel, and I got a hold of his heel, and I was able to submit him really quickly. And it was just so interesting. It just really reminded me of that, because like there are these particular situations, like, oh, your enemy is on horseback, and you haven't really routed them yet, and yet they're running away. Like, this isn't a real retreat. There's got to be somebody who knows this and knows not to chase them.
And they fell for it every time. Like, it happened so many times. And
Yeah.
even the people that did the feign retreat would even fall for it at times. So it's just like, I mean, it's like at some point, it's
You
like
do
I would
this
be
to
reading
people,
like
you
these
should
historical
know.
accounts. I'm reading these historical accounts, and I see, and they're like, and so went for the and started to fall for the feign retreat, and I'm like, but you do this, like, you know.
It's
But I
funny
guess it's
too.
kind of like a false ashi, right? Like you were saying, like,
Yeah.
you're just like, it's too sweet to not go for it.
Yeah, they're like,
And
no, no, the heel's right there. I'm gonna get it. And it's like, no, you're not. No, you're not.
yeah, and that will be let me see. I got to see where I put it at here. Okay, so let's talk about deception. So one of the things that particularly, and this is something I've only found in like the Arab archery manuals, is they had different, what you would call demolition arrows. Okay, that's what I refer to them as, demolition arrows. So let's just say this is just a blank shaft, but I've already fixed it up. So we've got our shaft here, and let's say this arrow's been shot, and you find it on the battlefield, and you pick it up. You've been shooting this at the enemy. They pick it up, they load it, and they draw it back, and all of a sudden their string breaks. Well, they had these things called, I don't know if you guys can see that. Do you see the little blade in there?
Yes.
So they had razor arrows that had blades inserted into the nock. Now, how did they shoot these? They had like a cone that would sit on the string that
Oh,
you could
wow.
insert the nock into and shoot it. And so the enemy's picking them up, and they're like, we got arrows now. And then they draw it, and boom, string's gone. Hope you got a spare, and so it's little things like that the Arab archers, the Mamluk archers particularly, like these, and
That's
and
so
sometimes you can
interesting.
just leave them on the field and let people just pick them up. They're like, we found a bushel of arrows. It's like, you sure did, you
You're
know?
like you're like the enemy's planning to raid our supply depot. Leave them a bunch of those.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
that's like a beautiful, like, like with Art of War stuff, one of the principles is, right, like if you can take the enemy's supplies and make use of them, then it's like that's considered to be like an ideal implementation of tactics, right? But then it's
Yeah,
like, when you know the rules, then you know how to like play with them. So you say, oh, that they've got a good general, like they'll take our stuff. They know to take arrows, and then you send them a bunch of those, and then now you've kind of used their own knowledge against them. That's super fascinating.
yeah, and some of the different things they had too. So you had different tools, say like for instance, you're running low on arrows, or if you just wanted to kind of mess with the enemy a little bit with like crossbow bolts. So say you got like crossbow bolts and you don't have any arrows left. They had tools, different devices that actually would enable them to shoot. Let me grab one here. So you had different tools that enabled you to shoot different types of crossbow bolts from a regular bow.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
this one was more used for like flight archery. This is called a seeper. And essentially what this does is attaches to the hand, and it acts as an overdraw device here. So you can
Huh.
take these and take really short arrows and send them a very, very long way. I've taken one of these and sent out of like a 45-pound bow. I sent an arrow about 335 yards
Wow.
with this. So it's pretty cool. This is probably the one I like the most. Uh, Korean culture calls it the tong ah. In Persian, and you find across the Middle East, they call it like a navak, but it's essentially like an arrow trough. And basically what happens, I got to see if I've got an arrow. Yep, here's one right here. So I can show you kind of sort of how this works. So this was a really cool tool also. So, crossbow bolt length item here. So you could load it up, and you would essentially take this and load it around the hand. And then this would slide through. If I can get it through here. To here, and using our thumb draw, it actually is going to lock it into place here. This serving is very small on this bow. There we go. So it locks into place here, and using the thumb draw, we can actually keep it attached in. Yep. So we can keep it actually attached onto the string here to make our shots with it. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. I wanted to show you how this thing works. I need to get one with a bigger serving. This one has a small serving. Oh, here we go. Why not? Let's.
It's like a guide for the arrow.
Yeah, here we go. We'll grab this guy. So this is more of like a Manchu style bow here. So this one's got a nice fat serving on it, so it'll hold on to the arrow. So it essentially goes on like so, slides up, and we lock in on our arrow. So if you could see here, drawing back, this arrow is well past my hand. And it scares a lot of people on this, but the trough is designed to keep it away from the gun you're shooting. So essentially when you're here, when you're drawing back, you have the ability to make your shot, and it shoots the arrow through on there. So pretty neat little device.
You can fire a shorter arrow, or potentially like overdraw the bow and get more range out of it than you normally would.
Yeah, they're moving. Those arrows are moving they move extremely fast. You can use them for flight shooting to shoot like distances and everything too. There's a phenomenal archery movie. Probably the best archery movie ever made is a Korean movie called War of the Arrows. And the guy on there uses these a lot. And he uses them to shoot at the enemy, because a lot of times if they find the arrow, they can't reuse it unless they've got one of those guides. So it's like, oh, well, plus it's traveling very, very fast. So it can cover ground very, very quickly. Wow. So they're pretty interesting tools.
That's super cool. So kind of like, running out of time a little bit here, but the last thing I wanted to talk to you about and just kind of get like, maybe like as succinctly as possible, what are some things that you would advise people, like if they're looking to get into archery, start, kind of studying this stuff and practicing, like what would be like maybe like 2 or 3, important points for them to, what would you recommend? What would be some tips?
Depending on what style they want to practice, if they're interested in practicing the thumb draw style, there are not a lot of instructors here in the West. There's a few, not many that are as active as I am, but there are some out there. With the thumb draw, you can find a lot of sources online as far as like, how to and whatnot. A lot of people struggle. I mean, I'll be honest. A lot of people struggle because it's the same as like you can find how-to videos of how to do Jujigatami, but guess what? I mean, it takes forever for people to learn armbar. Just a typical spinning armbar from mount. Like a lot of people.
Yes. No, it's hard to learn things from a video or online, especially if you've never felt them or experienced them before. Exactly,
and there's certain idiosyncrasies with the draw that a lot of people can't get. One of the things I offer is fast form coaching, where people can. I've done this enough where people can send me a video of them shooting, and I can literally go, okay, you need to do this, and this. And they'll send me a video back with corrections, and we can kind of go back and forth. So that's something I offer for people.
It's a great way to work.
Yeah. Also, find a bow. I typically recommend for people, whatever style they want to do, whether they want to do Mediterranean or thumb draw, I always tell them to get an ambidextrous bow. Find one that basically you can shoot with either right or left hand, because that means you can shoot either style. So you don't have to worry about anything like that. The biggest thing for people that are starting with archery, and for this mostly, I'm talking to the men out there, you're not going to be as strong as you think you are. when you're like, I can easily draw. They're like, I rode 225 for 10 reps. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, you still need to probably start with 35 or 40
Yeah.
because, you know, I liken it to teaching people. I used to teach people firearms training also. I'm the NRA instructor and everything. And I tell people, I'm like, you don't start people out with 44 Magnum. You start them
Yeah.
out with a 22, so we got to get you with your technique and everything correctly. You'll make a lot of training scars in
Yeah.
your shooting if you get something that's too heavy. There's a lot of things that go wrong with that. So get something if you're starting out, get something around that 35-pound range. You'll
Yeah.
probably outgrow it, but it's okay because most of the bows I train with, I don't train with heavy stuff. I train
Yeah.
with light stuff for technique, so I can do it a lot, and then it
Yes.
translates right over into heavier stuff.
Exactly. No, that makes perfect sense.
And probably the next biggest thing that I recommend, those probably these last two are like the two biggest, is form work. I do a training called Torba training, which is essentially you are shooting from about bow's length from so let's say I've got one of my little short bows, like a bow length from me to the target, and all I'm doing is working form. That's it. I don't worry so much about where I'm hitting or anything. I just want to feel that form and make sure my form is correct, because a lot of people see me getting out and shooting 50, 60, 70 yards with my bows and hitting like bullseyes, and they assume I do that all the time. I very rarely do that. Most of my shooting is probably under 10 yards.
Yeah.
And once you get the form right, everything's gonna. All you're doing then is you're just adjusting elevation, and that's easy. The form work will help you get where you're not moving side to side, because
Yeah.
if you're off just a little bit up close at 40, 50 yards, you're not even on target.
Totally. Yeah. It's going to divert even more.
Yeah, so working that form, and people say I don't have a place to shoot. You don't need much room. I mean, I have you can do this in your garage. You can do this. I mean, you can have a designated room in the house with a target and just stand in front of it.
I always tell people to, like,
Yeah.
more convenient training, like training that's more convenient for you to do. You're going to do more and you're going to get better than like having the perfect setup and the perfect scenario and then doing it once a month is not as good as the guy who's been shooting in his garage every single day.
Yes, 100%. And that's what people. It's a level of consistency that you have to get, and that's what you're looking for is consistency. And you're always looking to tighten it up, tighten it up, tighten it up. Once I get where it's really easy for me to keep it nice and tight at 10, maybe I'll move to 15. And work from there, because you will have to make a few
Yeah.
slight adjustments in there as you move to range.
Yep.
But that and the form's going to be so important, because when I'm very close, I can draw and go boom and shoot, or I can draw boom. But the further your distance goes, the more you're going to have to hold to kind of lock in, because you don't want a whole lot of movement. So sometimes I may hold for a 5 to 6, 7 count at longer range, just to stay locked in, to make sure I'm moving, I'm not moving too much. So that form work is going to be, and here we go, right? Goes full circle back to martial arts. We're talking about form. It's essentially a kata that you're doing here, an active form of meditation that you're doing at a close range, that you're working on your technique that you're going to be utilizing.
That makes perfect sense. That's a great answer, man. Hey, I really appreciate you doing this. This was awesome. That hour just flew by. I mean, it happens a lot, but this one went really fast for me. It was a lot of really fascinating stuff. Gave me a lot of good ideas. But thank you for taking the time and doing this. And great stuff.
Absolutely, man. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Yeah, we should come back and do an episode 2 on this. I would love to.
Yeah.